What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we're going to talk through my top 10 lessons learned and takeaways from week 1 of the fantasy football season. This is one of my favorite videos I get to do every single year. The idea is that instead of you scrolling through box scores for hours on end, I distill all of the important details from the given week in fantasy football into one video and give you 10 takeaways that are based on data, usage trends, statistics. We're going to talk through some big rookie wide receiver report trends. We have a lot to get into as always. If you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. We're going to skip the intro again. We have a lot to get into, and I will be honest, it's top 10 lessons learned, but for week 1, we always do more than that. There is a ton to go through here. I want to say that we end up with like 13, 14, 15 takeaways here. And the first one is really more of a PSA. Take a breath. Don't overreact. It's just week 1. All right, when we look at Cooper Adams' tweet here, for what it's worth, when I did a study on it 2 years ago, I found that redraft ADP is more predictive of rest of season scoring than current season scoring up until after week 4. So until after week 4, we don't have enough data to say, hey, what has happened at this point in the actual season is better than what we thought before the season, right? ADP or just your priors in general. And then Adam Harstad comes over the top, one of the OGs from Football Guys. He said that he did the same study in 2013 all up to 2023 and found the same thing. So take a step back. The sky is not falling. It is just 1 week of data that we're working with here. And not only is it just 1 week of data, which is usually much more noisy than our preseason thoughts, but it was also a really weird week 1. And it's kind of been that way since preseason got taken out, where week 1 is just kind of really sluggish. Where if we look back, Steve he used to be at PFF, Palazzolo here, week 1 passing touchdowns, 61 in 2019, then 52, then 61, then 51, then 37 last year, and then 33 this year, pending Monday Night Football. So scoring's down across the board in terms of passing. You also have a Jake Bose tweet here where it's week 1 average PPR fantasy points per team by position. You have the 24th lowest week for quarterbacks since 2014, the 58th lowest for running backs since 2014, 20th lowest for receivers, and the lowest week for tight end scoring since 2014, which actually brings us into our second takeaway here. And I just wanted to talk about the elite tight ends. All right, it was not a great week for the elite tight ends, and I just figured we should just talk about them real quick because that is one of the biggest stories right now, right? We had Sam Laporta brick, we had McBride bricked, Travis Kelce wasn't great, Kincaid wasn't great either. Really, the only tight end that came through was like Isaiah Likely, and it just wasn't pretty across the board. But I thought this was a good tweet from David Gontiari here. You look at the elite tight ends from last year. You have Sam Laporta, you have Trey McBride, you have Kelce, Mark Andrews, Kincaid, Pitts, Kittle, Ingram, Njoku, Ferguson. All of them were brutal. And then he said by the end of the year, Laporta had broken the rookie tight end reception record. McBride and Njoku totaled 80-plus receptions. Ferguson totaled 70-plus. Kittle topped 1,000-plus yards. So it's not the end of the world. It's 1 week of data. The elite tight ends will be fine. And we look at the elite tight ends in general. This is just all tight ends from this week sorted by expected fantasy points in their game for half PPR by Hayden Winks here. Trey McBride's going to be fine. 13.3 expected half PPR points was fine. Young stud. I'm also completely fine with where Laporta was at as our tight end 4 on this list. Now, a little bit higher concern for guys like Dalton Kincaid here, but I'm not completely panicking on Dalton Kincaid yet. Dwayne McFarland points out here, 88% of the snaps, 83% of the routes, just 9% of the targets. I have to believe that the targets are coming and are on their way, but when we look at last year, his snap share and his route share was much lower in terms of his games with Dawson Knox. So we're actually seeing him on the field. Anything over 80% of the routes for a tight end is elite usage. We just need the targets to be there, which I think that they will eventually. Now, I'm a bit more concerned with guys like Kelce and Mark Andrews. These are guys fighting washed allegations at this point. Travis Kelce, you had a lot of targets for Rice. You have Xavier Worthy looking super explosive. Kelce is now 34 years old. He's like half celebrity, half football player. I do think the concerns preseason for, him kind of falling off in terms of efficiency, him kind of wanting to save himself for the playoffs are all very valid at this point. I think he's still a tight end 1 easily. He's still a top 6 guy very easily. He's going to have massive spike weeks with like 2 touchdowns in a given game, but him gapping the field at tight end 1 overall like he's done, 2 of the past 3 or 4 years, probably not happening this year. And then you have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And I'm not really panicking on Mark Andrews, and I'm also not disregarding Isaiah Likely. This was a massive W in my eyes for the Ravens staff, for the Ravens front office. The fact that they identified that, okay, Isaiah Likely is much better than Nelson Aguilar, Tylan Wallace, Deontay Hardy, whatever. We need to get him on the field no matter what. Pat Thorman had a tweet here. The Ravens ran 12 personnel, which is just 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers on the field, 53% of the time. Last year, the Falcons led the league with 42%. So they were 11% over the league leader last year, and that was in a trailing game script, right? When you have 2 tight ends out there, it's usually more run heavy. But the fact that they use that personnel in a trailing game script is massive, which then brings us to this PFF chart here, which, by the way, Nathan Jahnke over there goes through all of the snap counts, routes run, all of that. It's a must-read piece every week. And you can see here, 48 routes for Zay Flowers, 45 for Rashad Bateman, 38 for Mark Andrews, 35 for Isaiah Likely. As long as both of those guys are like above 35 plus, right? 35 of 51 is like hovering right around like 75%, 70%. That's just fine. If you can run over 70% of the routes at tight end, right? We just talked about Kincaid. 80% plus is elite. 70% plus is still fine, especially if Isaiah Likely is going to be as efficient as he was. And we've already seen what Mark Andrews has done in the past. 2 targets is not going to hold. Mark Andrews has historically done really poorly against the Chiefs. So to me, I would have Mark Andrews at the bottom of this tier, right? I would have the 2 young guys up top, so Kincaid, McBride. I would put Laporta up there, of course. And then I think you could also, I mean, we're going to talk about Bowers in a second here, but Brock Bowers is now in this tier of like Andrews, Kelsey, Isaiah Likely as like your next tier of tight ends. I guess you could throw Evan Ingram in there as well, even though he didn't do all that great. But like I said, I'm not panicking on Mark Andrews. Tight end 1 overall is probably out of the question. But I think he can still be a fine top 6 tight end, give you some really big spike weeks with touchdowns, and Isaiah Likely is an every week startable tight end because, again, they're running enough 12 personnel for them to have 2 tight ends that are running 70% plus of the routes, and that's all I care about. I don't care about the snaps, just how many of the routes are you running routes for on these passing plays, and Likely hits that threshold we are looking for. Now let's go to, I know last year we did it in the middle of the video, but I wanted to start putting it towards the front of the video because I know that some of you guys come to this video in general for the rookie wide receiver report, but we're changing it this year. It is the rookie receiver report where we are going to cover not only wide receivers, but tight ends as well. Now, of course, the world famous rookie receiver report is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Not that one, but this one. Let me put my face up here as well. They have a ton going on every week. Look at this week 2 promo calendar over on Underdog. Use promo code RON. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You have more money Mondays. You have no sweat Tuesdays. You have a lamb free pick on Wednesday. You have a 30% profit boost on Thursday, a random promo on Friday. They are giving out tons of promos in their pick'em lobbies. You have weekly battle royales, which we drafted 5 last Friday. Those actually ended up doing pretty good. I'll review them next Friday, but there's a lot going on over there in terms of pick'ems, in terms of drafts. There's NBA drafts going on. Make sure you check them out. Pick'ems are one of the more fun things you can do while you're watching these games, especially the primetime ones. So check out Underdog. I have the links that'll take you there. Use my promo code in the description and the comment section down below. Now, when we talk about the rookie receiver report here, I'll put myself over on this side. The idea is we have each rookie, right? We have receivers and tight ends. All of them have ran 15 or more routes. We have their week 1 route percentage, so how often are they on the field, right? Are they starters? Are they rotational players? We have targets per out run. Are they commanding volume? We have yards per out run. Are they efficient? First downs per out run. Are they moving the chains and being engines of their offense? And then PFF receiving grade. This is just how are they looking on film. And historically speaking, like last year, I believe Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, and Rashee Rice all had 80 plus PFF receiving grades. So we want that to be at 80 plus, just of like a really good indicator for these young receivers. Now, at the top here, you'll see far and away in terms of PFF receiving grade, they're also sorted by PFF grade here. You have Brian Thomas Jr. and you have Ladd McConkey. Both guys, if you've drafted them, are, like, I would feel really good about them, right? They're playing about, 3/4 of the routes, which is just fine, to be honest with you. Like, that's, I believe Rashee Rice had like a 77% route share on the Thursday game. Of course, you would want like 90%, 100% plus, but as a rookie in your first game, that is more than fine. They both had 20% plus targets per out run. They both had 75 plus receiving grades. They were both top 24 wide receivers on the week. Yes, they both scored touchdowns, but the underlying data says here that 100% they were more than just scoring touchdowns. Brian Thomas Jr., super efficient, giving you first downs per out run. Ladd McConkey, over 30% targets per out run. Both guys, again, if you have them on your team, you should feel really good. Now, next up, I want to talk about Brock Bowers, man. He was honestly the reason to start including tight ends in these reports here. And just, my God, 78% route participation, right, which we just talked through with Andrews and Likely. Anything over 70% is a startable tight end. Now, he gives you 20% plus targets per run. Again, he is a tight end, a rookie tight end next to Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, two legit target earners. 20% plus targets per run, 1.87 yards per run, which is only what? That's actually higher than Ladd McConkey in terms of efficiency, behind just Worthy, Coleman, and Brian Thomas. So he's efficient, he's commanding targets, he's moving the chains as well. 9.7% of his routes run result in a first down. That is the second highest on the list behind just Brian Thomas Jr., and then a 68.3 PFF receiving grade. That is crazy. For a first game for a tight end in his first career game, like I just said, with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, like, that's crazy. Now, the Chargers, I don't know how they are historically versus tight ends, but I know Derwin James is like one of the best safeties in the league and probably lined up over Brock Bowers a good amount of the time. Like, that's crazy. To me, Brock Bowers is in the tight end one conversation, not overall, but just, of course, at top 12. But, he's going to be fighting for top 6. And again, after like Laporta and McBride, there's so much uncertainty right now that if we checked back in like 4 or 5 weeks and Bowers was like the tight end 3 or tight end 4 rest of season, it wouldn't shock me. Very impressed with Bowers. Now, after that, we have 2 studs on good teams, just kind of going down the list here. We have Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy, 2 guys that, to me, high-end wide receiver performances attached to big-time quarterbacks, right? Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Coleman, 90% of the routes, which is huge. Getting to the top of that depth chart in a game where Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, and Matt Collins all played, huge. He also led that entire team in targets, huge. He also gave you efficiency. 1.89 yards per run is solid. 18.5% targets per run is solid as well. Moved the chains okay. Like, nothing was super crazy for Keon Coleman, but the fact that he led the team in targets, was out there 90% of the routes, and put up fine efficiency numbers, fine target earning numbers, that's all huge. He can only really grow from here. Then you have Xavier Worthy. 12.5% targets per run is, of course, the holdup here. We want him to command more volume, but they gave him more manufactured touches, some rush attempts as well. He scored 2 touchdowns, and that's huge, right? He gives you 1.96 yards per run, second most efficient receiver on this list. And then he also gives you, 64 PFF grade isn't great. 8.3% first downs per run is fine, but he at least flashed that he's talented. He has the game-breaking speed, and that's really what we're looking for, because once Hollywood Brown comes back, he's going to squeeze him for that 77% route participation, but with the 2 touchdowns, with the long speed, with the big plays, we're hoping that makes it difficult for them to take him off the field, and we're hoping that the volume steps up. Now, let's have a tough conversation here about the top 10 picks. We have Malik Neighbors, we have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Rome Odunze, all disappointing in their debuts. Malik Neighbors was fine, right? He gave you, I think, he gave you like 5 catches for 60 yards. That's fine. He'll have better days in terms of 14% targets per out run. It was one of those days where Brian Flores was just blitzing Daniel Jones all game, and what that does is it's not going to let you get to your read downfield on Malik Neighbors, but he should be just fine moving forward. Then you have Rome Odunze, which to me was a huge W to get 85% of the routes. I was considered to be at like 60%. The issue is that Caleb Williams was so bad that nobody really got home in that offense. Then you have Marvin Harrison Jr., all at the bottom here. Worst PFF grade, not a single first down on the day, 0.11 yards per out run. Just really ugly stuff, but I'm not really going to freak out over really any of these guys after one game. It's just one game. These guys are all top 10 elite wide receiver prospects. What I will say on Marvin Harrison Jr., if you drafted him at the 1-2 turn, you probably drafted him to be like your wide receiver 1, or at least a guy that's going to be starting every single week. To me, he's now more of a back-end wide receiver 2 until he finds his footing in the NFL. Then we have A.D. Mitchell I wanted to talk about. He is really exciting. With A.D. Mitchell, he ran 75% of the routes. You can ignore the yards per out run. You can ignore the first downs per out run, the PFF grade. 27.8% targets per out run is pretty bonkers. He was commanding a ton of volume. He was commanding a ton of volume downfield as well. Richardson just missed him on like 2 wide open touchdowns, but he looked good. He commanded volume in this offense. Of course, it's like lower volume and more consolidated with Anthony Richardson, but A.D. Mitchell looked the part yesterday. Then we have the rest, which is kind of like just the bottom tier of like other leftover guys. You have Xavier Legette. Only 59% of the routes isn't going to work, but 30% targets per out run is pretty crazy on a 17.1 yard ADOT, but it didn't really result in anything. 1.52 yards per out run is fine, but on that ADOT, it should be much higher. 8.7% first downs per out run is also good. Not a great PFF grade, but Legette's fine. He just needs to rise up that depth chart. Then you have Jalen McMillan. He's actually already there in 3 wide receiver sets with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans at 88% of the routes. Everything else is kind of pedestrian here, but he did catch a touchdown. He did drop like another pass as well. we'll see. I don't know if there's going to be a ton of opportunity for him with Godwin and Mike Evans there as well, but this is at least a good sign that he's on the field making plays. Then you have Devon Vele, who is up here. He is the fifth, player on this list in terms of PFF grade. I'm not really buying into it. Yes, 25.8% targets per run is great, but it's like Rondale Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson type usage where it's on a 2-yard ADOT. He's not efficient. He's not moving the chains. I'm just not really going to fall for that kind of profile. Then you have Luke McCaffrey and you have Jalen Polk. They both got on the field, but they didn't do much with it. And then you have JT Sanders and Theo Johnson. They're running routes, but are unstartable for now. Now, our fourth takeaway or lesson learned is Kupp back, man. Cooper Kupp looked like an absolute monster last night. Now, of course, Puka Nacua goes down, and Cooper Kupp comes out here, leads the entire NFL in Week 1 in target share with 44% of his team's targets, 21 total targets. He ends with 32 PPR points as the wide receiver 2 on the week behind just Jaden Reed. Pretty crazy. If this is what we're going to get when Puka Nacua isn't healthy, then this is somebody that in games without Puka Nacua is a top 6 option at wide receiver. 2.16 yards per out run as well, so he was pretty efficient. I don't think the 2021 ceiling of like 26 points per game, like Jerry Rice reincarnated, is on the table, but that 2022 where he had like 21 points per game, that's very much on the table right now. The Rams threw the ball a bunch. They were focusing on Kupp, because after Kupp, it's like, I can't believe Tyler Johnson made a big play last night. On top of Tyler Johnson, you have like Jordan Whittington. It's just not like a great cast of receivers, so Kupp will be the focal point. And that's pretty huge. So I would say, again, until Puka's back, Kupp is a top 6 to 12 option rest of season. And even when Puka does come back, this is somebody that's still going to flirt with top 12 numbers. Then I wanted to touch on Saquon. We have Saquon Barkley thoughts. I wanted to talk about the legendary RB watch as well. I don't know that we're going to have a legendary RB watch as like a weekly segment, but, I was greeted to, after this weekend, I was greeted to a bunch of comments, and it doesn't bother me. I get a bunch of comments on the we said, don't draft him in your home league. Coming back from the Brazil game, putrid take on Saquon so far, my dude. We got Barkley is probably RB1 week 1. Glad I drafted him quite a bit. Saquon looked pretty good last night to me. That's crazy. Barkley has 20 TD upside. I wish I had these guys subbed. These guys never played football and can't see talent. I mean, contrary to popular belief, I played football until I was in 7th grade. Thank you very much. But I get it. Saquon had a big game, and I did kind of just want to talk about my thoughts on it. He goes off. I do want to clear the air as well that my take was he was a bad pick at 110 in your home league because he was way more expensive there than other places, where in other places like high stakes, underdog, he was more of like a early to mid second. I had him in my final RB rankings video as RB7, which to me isn't that egregious and isn't really that far off how I feel about him today. I had McCaffrey ahead, Brees, Bijan, Gibbs, JT, Achane, all ahead of him. And I will concede that he looked great. He had a ton of juice, but I'm not going to like hold this massive L after one game. It's a long season. We'll see how it goes. The bet was always that he was a low floor bet, which I still believe, right? This was a aging RB, already had a history of an ACL tear, already have a history of ankle issues, changing teams past what is usually the prime area for running backs in the NFL. We didn't know what his role was going to be. We didn't know if he would still have a ton of juice. And he puts up a really great game, but he had 3 touchdowns for a 75% touchdown share. That's not going to hold. We also saw plenty of Jalen Hurts, like tush push and red zone usage once they got inside of the 10. I want to say 2 or 3 of his touchdowns were from outside of even the 10-yard line, kind of like long, explosive plays, which are good, but not super sustainable over an entire year. Then he also had just 2 targets for a 7% target share. That would put him on a 34 target pace. If we look at all of the running backs over the last 25 running backs that hit 20 or more points per game, just Derrick Henry got there on 34 targets or less. Again, Saquon had just 2 targets in this game, and that was one of the biggest issues for me, was that would he get squeezed for touchdowns by Jalen Hurts? Would he get squeezed for targets by Jalen Hurts? He's at least getting squeezed for targets, or 4 targets. And then also, they played a Packers team that has allowed the 12th and 11th most fantasy points over the last 2 seasons. Now, I will concede, was he probably a fine pick, a good pick where he was going late first? I would say so, but I was also passing on him for guys like A.J. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, all guys who I feel pretty good about at this point as well. Now, if we look at just kind of the usage among these top backs, I love using this tool, by the way, over on Fantasy Life. It's called the Utilization Report, kind of fueled by PFF and Dwayne McFarland. You can compare the usage of all these guys. You have their usage score at the top, which is like, 8.7 for Saquon, 9.3 for Bijan, and so on. Then you have their snap share, their rush attempt share, their route share, their targets, just their overall usage. And Saquon, 81% of the routes is great. But again, just 7% of the targets, 8% targets per run isn't amazing, and that's kind of the holdup. Also, 0% of the 2-minute drill snaps, those went to Kenneth Gainwell. So I don't know. We'll see how the receiving ceiling goes. It's just, again, like when we're shooting for upside, again, it's the whole legendary upside RB argument of like, can Saquon be a good pick and give you like 18 to 20 points per game? Sure, but can he light the league on fire, RB1 overall, like a lot of these guys? It would be really tough, You have to go, Dalvin Cook had 54 targets, 63 targets, but that was in 14 games. He'd have to kind of have that Jonathan Taylor 2021 season, which I think is in play. But even then, Jonathan Taylor had 51 targets. Right now, Saquon is on pace for 34. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I'm not freaking out just yet. Again, the guys I was taking him over him was Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, similar issue in terms of targets, but I was just more inclined to bet on Jonathan Taylor as the younger player, still in their prime, in an offense they're familiar with. I don't have to take on all the uncertainty of him changing teams. So we were taking JT over him, and I'm fine with that. We're talking, 95% of the snaps here, almost all the rush attempts. He ran 83% of the routes, which is an elite number. Sure, he didn't get any targets, but that route share is crazy, and he had 100% of the 2-minute drill snaps. So he's out there in all phases. Again, the targets weren't there this week, but the usage was amazing. You also have Bijan, who looked good. He had the highest usage score of this list, 92% of the snaps. He had 100% long down and distance, 100% 2-minute drill. I think higher PPR outputs are coming for both of those teams. Devon Achane, we were huge on. He had 20-plus points in week 1, 7 targets. He looked like an absolute monster just in terms of getting routes, getting targets, getting like kind of Kamara-type usage. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, I did want to touch on him because people seem to be panicking on him after the Sunday night game. And I mean, he had 32% targets per out run. He still had this like Kamara-esque role, kind of similar to Devon Achane, right? Where you're out there for the 2-minute drill, you're running a good chunk of routes, you're getting a good chunk of your targets, you're probably playing about 50% of the snaps. His rush attempt share was certainly low, but 17.4 PPR points on the week. I think that his split with Montgomery is going to be similar to this every single week. Gibbs is going to win on efficiency, big plays, pass catching. So still not all that worried. He's still pretty much a locked and loaded RB1 for me. And even this week, where his usage wasn't amazing, he still got home on 17.4 PPR points. And I think Montgomery in his own right will be a guy you can start every week. It just kind of reminds me of your Mark Ingram Kamara split from back in the day on the Saints. Then we also have the, snap share leaders. I just want to kind of show the workhorses as well as we just kind of talk through RB1 overall. I'd have a hard time seeing how Ramondre or Joe Mixon get there in terms of RB1 overall, but they both had amazing debuts and are certainly in the RB1 conversation moving forward, just like top 12 running back conversation. Kyren Williams, the Corum stuff was overblown, but even still, Kyren, even on that volume, still kind of limped his way to the finish line of giving you a decent finish on that last-minute touchdown, but Detroit's really good against the run as well. So it's going to be interesting. I will say the downside for Kyren, the only downside is that if Corum can actually work his way into this rotation, they like Ronnie Rivers so much, it might be a 3-way split. We'll see. But I think for now, you should feel very good about having Kyren Williams. Then I wanted to talk about ambiguous backfields. And again, all of this data is from Fantasy Life. Make sure you check them out. I actually played on their trivia team over the summer at the BDG live event. But here, our 6th takeaway here, we're just going to talk through ambiguous backfield. So it's going to be 10 combined into 1. I do want to say this is a week 1 snapshot, okay? Things change over an entire season. It is just 1 week. Remember last year, Devon Achane was a healthy scratch. Last year, who else am I thinking of? We had DeAndre Swift, was a 0 pretty much and was behind Kenneth Gainwell, and then he sort of took the reins. So things are going to change. This is just what things look like from a week 1 perspective. Tony Pollard is the lead back here. 70% of the rush attempts, 60% of the snaps. So he is the lead guy. Tyjae Spears is the, satellite back out there in long down and distance and 2-minute drill snaps. Tony Pollard had 19 touches to Tyjae Spears 8 touches. Tony Pollard, he looked good as well. He had a long, or maybe not a long touchdown, it was a 20-yard touchdown run. But he looked fine. He's probably going to be in that fringe RB1 conversation, or maybe high-end RB2, to be honest with you, moving forward. Then you have the Bengals split, which wasn't great for Chase Brown. You had 11 touches for Zach Moss, 6 touches for Chase Brown. Even in an environment where they trailed for a lot of that game, it still was not Chase Brown in the passing situations. 88% long down and distance for Zach Moss. You had 100% of the 2-minute drills for Zach Moss. Really not good for Chase Brown here. You're kind of going to have to hope that he can work his way up the depth chart the rest of the way, because it seems like they don't trust him in those passing downs, maybe for pass blocking reasons. But Zach Moss, if he's going to be out there for, 60% plus of the snaps, if he's going to get like 68% of the rush attempts like he did here, be the short yardage back for the goal line, and then also be the 2-minute drill back, that's actually a really, really good role for Zach Moss. You just need Joe Burrow in this offense to get it together. Then you have the Tampa Bay backfield. You have Bucky Irving versus Rachaad White. Rachaad White, clearly the better usage profile, but for a guy that was drafted for his role and his volume, he did have 21 touches to Bucky Irving's 11 touches. It was a game where they killed Washington. But Bucky Irving had 62 rushing yards to Rachaad White's 31. Rachaad White also hit 68% of the snaps, which is the lowest number he's hit since, I think it was late last year. He only had one game last year of 68% of the snaps or lower. So this was a new norm for Rachaad White. Now, was it garbage time and they threw in Bucky Irving at the end? Potentially. Or they actually really like Bucky Irving and he looked explosive. We'll see how that holds moving forward. This was one that I didn't even really think was an ambiguous backfield. But Travis Etienne got out-carried by Tank Bigsby, if I'm reading this correctly. I do want to double-check here. Of course, Jaguars versus Dolphins. But Travis Etienne, this is a little bit rough, man. 68% of the snaps, which last year, if you remember, he really tailed off towards the end. He didn't have less than 70% of the snaps until Week 10 on last year, and that's when he faded down the stretch. If we're starting the year already under 70% of the snaps, you're looking at late season 2023 Travis Etienne, which is kind of brutal. Now, maybe they fed the hot hand and Tank Bigsby. He did have a couple of long runs, but it's certainly not great, right? You're going to have Travis Etienne getting the passing down work, right? He's going to have routes. He's going to have targets. He's going to mix around all over the place. But if Tank Bigsby's going to have 12 carries to Travis Etienne's 12 carries, that's not a good thing. And Tank Bigsby looked pretty good. 12 carries for 73 yards, 6.1 rushing yards per carry. Etienne, of course, the goal line back, which is definitely huge, right? He gets a touchdown. He gets 12 carries for 44 rushing yards, but that's under 4 yards per carry. Bigsby was more efficient than him on the day. You can maybe tell yourself that it was just like a hot hand approach and Bigsby kind of earned his carries in this game. We'll see how it goes moving forward. But Tank Bigsby, I mean, it's already known that he was the handcuff, but he is very much the handcuff in this backfield. Then you have the Panthers backfield. You have Chuba Hubbard versus Miles Sanders, and the answer to that question is neither. They combined for less than 5 PPR points. They got blown out versus the Saints. An offense I thought was going to bounce back with Dave Canales looked brutal. Bryce Young looked brutal. You had 6 Hubbard touches to 5 Miles Sanders touches. No one in this backfield, or really on this team even, is startable moving forward. Then we have the Cowboys backfield. You have Zeke versus Rico Dowdle. And Zeke Elliott, main back here, best utility by Fantasy Life, better usage score. Now, I will say the touches were close. Zeke had 12 touches to Dowdle's 9. The thing is that Zeke's touches are just much more valuable, where he has all of the inside the 5 work. He has all the goal line work. He's out there for 42% of the long down and distance snaps, which is, again, like a third down passing situation. So he's getting some targets. He's getting some carries. He's getting the meaningful carries. It's not great. Dowdle's not startable. Zeke is like a touchdown-dependent RB3 for now. But I will say that wasn't a game versus the Browns. We'll see how it sort of goes moving forward. Then we have the Raiders, which this one is brutal. For anyone out there in the Zamir White hive, this is why we don't draft guys that look like pretty clear dead zone backs. Everybody went crazy about 20-touch games the last 4 games of last season for Zamir White and him being the quote-unquote workhorse for the Raiders this year. And they come out here, and it was a 60-40 split in favor of Alexander Mattison, which is crazy. Alexander Mattison is the passing down back. I never thought we'd really see this, right? He's kind of almost in the Amir Abdullah role from last year. Maybe we thought that Dylan Lowby would have this role, but 60% of the routes, all the long down and distance stuff, almost all of the 2-minute drill work, 16.2 PPR points this week, 9 touches for Mattison, 15 for Zamir. So Zamir White's going to out-touch Mattison even on lower snaps, but he's not going to get any of the passing down work, which is tough, because if he's only going to be the goal line in between the 20s back on a team that's not going to score a lot of points, right? They scored just like 10 versus the Chargers. That's pretty ugly. We have another one with Javonte versus Jaleel McLaughlin. This one not good either. You guys know I love Javonte Williams. I honestly loved all of the Broncos running backs, but this was not good. You had just 9 touches for Javonte, 15 touches for Jaleel McLaughlin. McLaughlin was used from the start of the game. Like I want to say he had like 5 catches on like dump screens that did nothing. The whole offense is pretty brutal with Bo Nix, to be honest with you guys, but this is a really bad split, man. They had nothing inside of the 5. You have it's very weird where Jaleel McLaughlin comes in for targets, to run targets, get screen game work, but Javonte was the preferred third down back and 2-minute drill back. He's a short yardage guy. He's out there for 50% of the snaps, but he didn't get enough touches and he didn't get any goal line stuff for him to work out. And he's almost kind of in a similar spot to Zamir White, where he is going to live off of touchdowns and inside the 5 attempts with this role, and he is not going to run, they're not going to get to the end zone enough times for that to be sustainable. So pretty rough. We're talking about like a boom-bust, touchdown-dependent RB3 for Javonte. Jaleel McLaughlin is probably like a fine PPR, like desperation play in 0 RB builds that you can just throw in RB2 spot, but nothing is all that pretty. Then we have the Chargers backfield. You have Dobbins versus Gus Edwards. Dobbins had a monster day, 10 touches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. Just very happy about Dobbins. I tweeted this out earlier. Dobbins hit 19.92 miles per hour on his big run. He tied Saquon for the fastest ball carrier speed by a running back in week 1. And I wasn't really fading him. I wasn't really targeting him either. He was just somebody I would take here and there. Regardless of how you feel about J.K. Dobbins, like just seeing him ball out after a torn ACL, a torn Achilles, we were all over him last year, and then he tears his Achilles in week 1. Seeing him ball out in any capacity is really great for football in general. But I will say, this usage is great, right? 60% of the snaps. He had 22.9 PPR points. He's out there as a long down and distance back, so he's, the pass catching back, 12% of the targets, 59% of the routes. Like, this is a really good usage role where he's the main back, he's the main receiving back in an offense attached to Justin Herbert in a Greg Roman rushing offense. So we'll see how this works. I will say really my only note on J.K. Dobbins is that I think that he has the potential to be a league winner this year. But it's kind of like, we're here for a good time, not a long time. I don't know at what point things will break down, if they will break down at all. But for a guy you probably drafted in like the 12th round, he is, to me, someone you can start every single week and expect pretty good output for as long as he's healthy. Then our 7th takeaway, I just wanted to talk about the Falcons and Steelers offense game, right? Because we had new OCs on both teams. We had a lot of disappointment on both teams. Let's talk about the Falcons first. Huge W. 100% of the routes for Drake London, 100% of the routes for Kyle Pitts. Huge. That is really, really good for both. Also, 23 routes for Bijan and 3 routes for Algier. I will just take a small victory lap for the guys out there that said, oh, well, Algier's going to be too involved for Bijan. Bijan, 50 snaps to Algier's 10 snaps, 23 routes to Algier's 3 routes, 5 targets to Algier's 0 targets, 18 carries for Bijan to Algier's 3 carries. So, no discussion, Vince Carter, it's over, .gif there. But the issue here was not London or Pitts. It was quarterback play, which is a tale as old as time for these two players, but we thought with Kirk Cousins it would be different. Well, Rich Rebar points out here, the Falcons were the only team that was not credited with a single play-action pass yesterday. That is crazy. 96% of their snaps were out of shotgun, second in the league behind only the Colts, who used play-action a league-high 57.9% of the time. Hayden Winks, I just watched every Falcons drop back. That was the least I've seen a quarterback move in a game ever, not an exaggeration. He broke the tackle box just once, I think. No play action, no under center, just 3 5-step drops, and pray there is no pressure. Wow. So Kirk Cousins is very limited. He's holding up this offense. They're not doing a lot of play action. They're kind of hiding Kirk Cousins. I will say, I think that there is better days ahead. You have to remember this was a healthy Steelers defense. TJ Watt was causing havoc all game long. They probably just wanted to protect Kirk Cousins for that reason, but not great. If we're going to go the rest of the season with limited play action, which is one of the more high-efficiency plays in football in terms of the passing game, and if we're going to go with everything out of shotgun, everything the same look, it's going to be really tough to have any efficiency in this offense, but I'm optimistic that maybe moving forward, Kirk gets better, has a little more trust in his legs, and if not, we do have Michael Penix waiting in the wings, and he is a complete mystery box. So, better days ahead. I wouldn't get too concerned with how things went here. Of course, Ray McLeod had the most targets on this team. That is not going to stick moving forward. And then we'll talk about the Steelers side of things here. You have Arthur Smith trying to get a little revenge game in with Cordarrelle Patterson. My God, man. When I saw Cordarrelle Patterson, I thought that I was getting trolled, pranked, whatever. Of course, Cordell Patterson had 14% of the snaps, 11% of the rush attempts, 33% of the third down, long down, and distance snaps. Just really, really tough stuff. And if he's going to have 14% of the snaps, Warren becomes almost unstartable. Najee Harris, though, about 60% of the snaps. He's going to run some routes. He's going to get some targets. He's going to get the goal line work. It's not going to be super efficient in terms of his touches, right? Just 8.9 PPR points, but he did have like 20-plus touches. So Najee's at least going to get volume in this offense. It's just going to come down to what quarterback is playing. Is it Fields? Is it not? There was some concern for Pickens I saw as well. I wouldn't be very concerned at all. He had 32% of the targets, 79% route share. You'd want more, but that's still fine. He had 13.5 PPR points. Pickens, to me, will be fine moving forward. Then I wanted to talk about the Seahawks new look offense for our 8th takeaway here. And this is what we got from Fantasy Life, where you can look at their game logs here. The good news, JSN, second most routes, right? So he passed Lockett, potentially on the depth chart, but Lockett did come into this game with an injury. The bad is that he was outproduced by Tyler Lockett, and JSN had a 3.5-yard ADOT, which was a super low ADOT, again, something we hoped wouldn't come with him from last year. So that's a huge bummer. We'll see if that changes, but it's not a good sign for that to happen early on. And I also wanted to talk through the Ryan Grubb offense, right? So Ryan Grubb is their new OC. He comes in from Washington, and these are two good stats from Andrew Erickson and Reach Rebar here, where Andrew Erickson says Ryan Grubb's new offense was highlighted by Smith getting rid of the ball quickly. Smith got the ball out quickly, averaging his third quickest time to throw, 2.54 seconds since joining the Seahawks in 2019. They also use motion, 79% of their offensive plays, a stark increase from 53%. So they're running more motion, they're getting the ball out quicker, and then also Rich Rebar points out 55% of Kenneth Walker's run yesterday came against light boxes, the highest of his career. So we're getting lighter boxes for Kenneth Walker, who absolutely balled out yesterday. Really good usage. He looked amazing. Just need him to stay healthy. He got banged up towards the end of that game. And then also we're getting more motion, more passing plays, a better look up front for the running back. So that's all really exciting. I think that honestly, the offense didn't look great, but he had 2 safeties in the early part of the game. It was just weird. Let Ryan Grubb break into the NFL. I think that good things are on the way. My 9th takeaway is that Sam Darnold can support an NFL offense if Kevin O'Connell's his head coach. And because of that, Justin Jefferson, everyone had a lot of concerns about, or not everyone, but there was a certain section of people that were very concerned about Justin Jefferson in terms of drafting him in the first round if his quarterback sucks and is Sam Darnold. Well, Sam Darnold looked really good. Of course, it was just the Giants. I mean, the Giants' defense is pretty good, though, right? They have Brian Burns up front. They have Lawrence up front. They have a lot of dogs on that team. Thibodeau, of course. And when we talk about it, he went 19 of 24 for 208 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 86.2 passing grade, the highest graded quarterback from Sunday over on PFF. He was 4th in EPA per play, 7th in yards per attempt on the week. I'm not saying that this is going to carry over and he's going to have, he's going to lead the league in, PFF grade or be some Pro Bowl quarterback, but he is going to do enough to support Jefferson. Now, Jefferson had just 4 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown, but that's because it was a very one-sided game script where they just killed the Giants. So there wasn't a need to pass the ball a ton. You can see right here, just 24 pass attempts. That's not going to hold. Jefferson had a 29% target share, so he's still very much good to go. Our 10th takeaway is the Browns. The good news, according to Hayden Winks and his chart here, they had the highest neutral pass rate of any team in week 1. So in neutral situations, they wanted to pass the ball a lot. The issue is that their quarterback is no good, right? They have Deshaun Watson. He was 29th of 30 quarterbacks in EPA per play. These were your worst quarterbacks by EPA per play on the week by a lot. The guy in 23rd was only at minus 0.1. So these guys were just stink out loud. Of course, Deshaun Watson is down there. Really not good. I think if you have any of the Browns at this point, you're hoping for Jameis Winston. I think that the calls for Winston are going to get loud. Of course, the Cowboys are a good defense. We'll see how Deshaun Watson does, but I don't know. If he doesn't do something quick, it's Jameis Winston time, and that's actually really exciting. I'll say as well, lesson learned, Klint Kubiak is fun, man. Kubiak, he comes from, of course, his dad coached. He comes from the Shanahan tree. And we see here from Rich Rebar, bottom x-axis is motion drop back percentage and then yards per attempt in the y-axis. And the Saints, in terms of drop back motion, so motion on pass plays, we're right up there with the Chiefs, the Packers, the Lions, which are 3 offenses I want to be included with when it comes to motion or really anything as it pertains to running an offense in the NFL. That is huge. Of course, Kamara has a good day. Derek Carr looked like he had something to prove. Of course, it was just the Panthers. They're not going to look like this every single week, but this is going to be a passable NFL offense. Potentially one of these, come out of nowhere offenses that nobody really expected from preseason. And people are concerned about Olave, but Olave's targets didn't come through today. One, they were never in a spot where they had to really pass the ball outside of the early play to Rashid Shaheed. And second of all, Olave's had a really strong target earning profile throughout his entire career. This is just one game of data, so the fact that he didn't have 8 targets in this game, not a big deal to me. If anything, I feel much better about Olave moving forward if this offense is going to look, of course, it's not going to put up 40 plus every week, but if it's going to look like a modern offense and there's going to be a lot of pre-snap motion and Klint Kubiak is actually running a good offense, that's huge. I will say as well, Jamal Williams over 10 rush attempts. Of course, they were leading by a lot, but Kamara's never going to be a 25 rush attempt guy. If Jamal Williams can get 10 plus in every game, he might be on the waiver wire video tomorrow. We shall see. 12th takeaway here. Like I said, more than 10 this week. We're going to do 14, I think, is the Texans, man. All Texans wide receivers will eat. We've been saying this all offseason. There's going to be enough to go around for all of them. And Dwayne McFarland points out route participation and targets. We want just 80% plus of the routes, 20% plus target share. All of these guys flirted with those numbers across the board. Tank Dell doesn't get home, but it's going to be like the 49ers, where 2 out of the 3 of these top guys, they're going to get home and have good weeks, right? Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins both were top 12 wide receivers this week, and that's going to happen throughout the entire year because you have C.J. Stroud who's going to make a lot of plays in this offense. This offense is going to score a lot of points, have a lot of passing yards, and with that means that it's not just a zero-sum game. It's not just going to be a one winner every single week. There's going to be 2 to 3 pass catchers in this offense who pop off in a given week, and that is huge. All of these guys I feel good about moving forward. Then after that, our 13th takeaway is Anthony Richardson is an agent of chaos. We have a tweet from our good buddy Jacob Sanderson. Richardson has started and finished 3 NFL games. In 2 of them, he scored 27 or more fantasy points with 11 or fewer completions. Hayden Wing said before that, Richardson's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback of week 1 with 9 completions. And it's just why rushing is king in the NFL when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy football. It is king. Richardson does not have to be a good player for him to work out. I said it at the top of my lungs the entire offseason. Even if you don't think Richardson is the best quarterback ever, he has enough chaos and enough deep throwing and scrambling and just chaos in his game. He's going to score a lot of fantasy points, and they invested too much in him to bench him at any point, really. He looked really good. He had a crazy pass where he had 3 guys in his face, off his back foot, chucks it 60 yards. He's just a monster. Of course, they lose that game versus the Texans, but really, really good showing for the Colts. I think Richardson led all quarterbacks this week in terms of ADOT, and that's why I faded Pittman all season, or all offseason, is Michael Pittman dominated the targets, but it was a low-volume passing day for this offense, and Pittman's ADOT was 9.7 yards. That's just not the area that Richardson's going to target a bunch. He would just rather scramble or find something deep. So when you're making your money in that area with Richardson, who's a low-volume passer and someone who doesn't really have to pass to that area of the field, it's not going to work out too well. So even on a 39% target share for Michael Pittman, it still wasn't great. You want the guys that are getting the downfield passing work like A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce. Pittman is not included in that section of the field, which makes him a really tough start, right? When they're in the red zone, they use Richardson, they use Jonathan Taylor. They don't go to Michael Pittman very much, and that just kind of reflects how we felt about him all offseason. I will say another guy who is that quarterback cheat code for our final takeaway and lesson learned here for 14 is the rookie quarterback debuts. Jaden Daniels goes out there and was the QB3 on the week in fantasy points with just 184 passing yards because he had 2 rushing touchdowns and a bunch added on the ground for 28 points. He didn't even look that great, but if he's going to run like this, he is an every week starter. But the catch is that you probably need him to progress as a passer, right? Just 184 passing yards for Terry McLaurin to be anything more than a boom bust wide receiver 3/flex option. The rest of the rookie quarterbacks, not as great, right? You have at the bottom of this list here, Bo Nix, really not good. Low ADOT, some really questionable throws. The Denver offense does not look fun this year. Caleb Williams, we're hoping that he bounces back, right? I got a lot of questions about him, DJ Moore, Roman Dunze, Keenan Allen. It was a Tennessee Titans team that had Jeffrey Simmons and it had Vondre Sweat up front versus the Bears' weakest point of their offensive line, which is just their interior offensive line. We'll see how this goes. I was under the impression or under the mindset of that Caleb Williams is going to come in and be a really good quarterback right away. That has not happened now. So what this comes down to is if you have him as your quarterback one, Caleb, you should look towards the waivers, which we'll cover on the waiver wire show, of guys to take and pair with Caleb Williams, because you're going to need somebody off the bench to start in more favorable matchups. For me, with Caleb Williams, I think it's a wait and see until he finds his footing. I do think that better days are ahead. I think that it was just one bad game. We'll see how he goes the rest of the way there. But it was ugly enough to spook me and not want me to fire him up for week 2 without considering other options. And I think once he finds his footing, we'll have Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen have some startable and some good weeks moving forward. But for now, I would just be tempering expectations. Again, huge W that Rome Odunze had 85% of the routes. You can say W for the Keenan Allen camp that he had so many targets, but none of it really resulted in fantasy points for any of them. Now, that is going to do it for us today. We do this every single Monday of the season. So if you enjoy the top 10 takeaways video, if you enjoy the rookie receiver report, leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next one.
Stones, like this froze.